I'll call tonight's special meeting to order. And Karen, can we have a roll call, please? Thanks for the confidence.
Councilmember Husnick,
Here.
Councilmember Byström,
Here.
Councilmember Munson,
Here.
Councilmember Valento,
Here.
and Mayor Bain.
I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council, we have an agenda before you this evening, and I do have one slight modification to the agenda to propose, and that would be for the removal of item 7B2 from the agenda. And with that, I would move that council approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion, and can we call it a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second, and all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and our agenda is approved. Our next item this evening is open forum. Open forum is any interested party's opportunity to address council on any topic of your choosing. And do we have anyone signed up? No one signed up. And do we have anyone online tonight?
Not.
Okay. Bring action back to council, and council, for your consideration are consent agenda items 6A through 6Q. And with that, I will entertain a motion or any changes to the consent agenda.
I move approval of the consent agenda items 6A through 6Q.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and our consent agenda is approved. And with that, we'll bring conversation to our regular agenda, and first for consideration is Resolution 1017-2206, which is purchase and authorization of the Rosenbauer pumper with commander chassis and related items. And Chief Newman.
Mayor, members of the council, what I'm bringing up to the council is approval of the replacement for engine 1. We're looking to purchase that through the Houston Galveston Area Council Cooperative. It's similar to purchasing off a state bid that meets all those requirements. Cost of the engine would be $876,411. It would come in 2 payments. The first payment would be in 2023 for the chassis. And then if we pay for that when that arrives, we actually get a discount of $13,130. That's a normal process that we have done with all of our trucks, is when the cabin chassis is completed, you get that first initial payment. Once the cabin chassis is completed and paid for, they complete the rest of the truck. That is an additional about 300 days, so the total from beginning to end is about 600 days for completion. And when that truck is complete, there's a final payment of $534,280 upon completion.
Thank you, Chief. Chief, can you just give a quick background on kind of the discussions that have led us to this point, and just speak a little bit about the Joint Fire Board and the Columbus participation in this purchase, just so we've got that on record as well?
Yes, so we started this process back in 2021, formed a truck committee, brought our needs to the Rosenbauer, basically looked to replace the truck as is, except obviously new. They provided us on September 6th with pricing. We brought it to the Joint Fire Board for review. Joint Fire Board voted unanimously to approve the purchase of the fire truck, and then the next step is to bring it to the council.
Has it gone to Columbus Council?
It did go to Columbus
Perfect.
Council, and it was unanimously approved. And their portion of that truck is 20%, a little over 20%.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions that we may have for Chief or points of discussion?
Mara, the only comment I'd like to make is that I sit on the Joint Fire Board with Mara, and we had this long discussion. This has been going on for, as Al mentioned, for quite some time, and I think it's about the best we can do, and it was a good buy. Unfortunately, when you're spending $800,000, and say that in one sentence. And so I do support the measure.
Any other points of question? All right, I think we're ready for a motion.
Mayor Bain, I move adoption of Resolution 10-17-22-06, purchase authorization of Rosenbauer pumper with Commander chassis and related items through the HGAC buy program.
I'll second.
The motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And motion carries. Thank you, Chief. And recommendation for new hires, Chief Peterson, and do you want to start with our first recommendation?
Actually, let me give you a little background
Perfect.
in regards to where we've been and where we are, and then I'll give you those recommendations. But yes, that's what I'm here for, is to give you 2 hiring recommendations to fill 2 of 3 open police officer vacancies in our department. As you are aware, law enforcement agencies across the country have been struggling with recruitment and hiring for the past couple of years. I've given you a few updates over the past few city council meetings, but I definitely want to update the community and all those in attendance on what's been going on, not only in our agency, but other agencies. Right now, there are over 100 agencies throughout Minnesota that are hiring police officers. Some of those larger agencies are in need of literally hundreds of officers, as we know from the metro area, and they're always hiring 20, 30 positions, whereas smaller agencies like ourselves might be hiring 2 or 3, and sometimes others that are a little bit larger than ours might be hiring 10 or 15. And so it's pretty competitive for all of us trying to recruit when there's very few candidates out there. For us, we are very fortunate that we have 2 candidates that I brought forward for recommendation who come very highly recommended. They passed our police officer hiring process, and I believe they will be fantastic officers here in Forest Lake. And something that really stood out for me is not only the recommendations that I received from other officers, other agencies, and some of the officers that had met them through the interview process, is when they came to me and I asked them why they wanted to work here. They said that they really liked the area. They heard really good things about the department, and the one thing that really stood out for both of them was the community support for the police department, and I thought that was great to hear. And I was, of course, I'm very proud of hearing that. The first recommendation I have for you this evening is to approve hiring Cole Gaspers to fill the open position of police officer at pay grade 9 and step 1 pursuant to the 2020-2022 LELS Local 111 labor contract.
Thank you, Chief. Chief, before we entertain motions on the specific hires, I just want to confirm and just clarify that these are open positions. These are not additional headcount. Once the 2, at the patrol officer position, once the 2 positions tonight, assuming council approves them, once they've started, where are we sitting as far as being at fully staffed, and what's left open?
We still have 1 opening, 1 vacancy. And yes, these vacancies have been open for over a year. Unfortunately, when we have hired somebody in the last year and a half, other officers who may have worked here decide to go to maybe another agency for whatever reason. Sometimes it's pay, sometimes it's closer to family, and there have been a couple that just got out of law enforcement altogether. So yes, full staffing is 27 full-time police officers. We're currently at 25 And so this is, or I'm sorry, 25 and 26, this would fill, and then we can still have the vacancy for the 27th.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
Council, any questions that you may have for Chief or points of clarification? Otherwise, we may be ready for a motion. And let's do these individually as two separate.
That's, okay, that was gonna be my question.
Let's do individually as two separate.
Mayor
Go
Bain,
ahead, go ahead.
I make a motion to approve the hiring of Cole Gaspers to fill the open position of police officer at pay grade 9 and step 1 pursuant to the 2020-2022 LELS Local 111 labor contract.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye. Oppose? And motion carries. And next, anyone ready for the next one?
And the second recommendation I have for you is to approve hiring Timothy Van Grinsven to fill the open position of police officer at pay grade 9 in step 5 pursuant to the 2020-2022 LELS Local 111 labor contract.
Good. Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief?
He's at a higher grade and a higher step.
Yes, so Cole Gaspers comes in to the department with very little law enforcement experience,
Okay,
whereas Tim comes into this department with 5 years' experience. He was also a canine officer and was, his last position was as sergeant.
okay, I just wanted to clarify to the public why that's happening.
Yep.
Madam Mayor, I make a recommendation that we, or that we approve the recommendation from our Chief of Police to hire Timothy Van Grinsven. Did I get that right? At a pay grade of grade 9, steps 5 at $42.11 per hour.
Very good. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, Chief Newman, back to you. Fire Relief Association benefit increase.
Mayor and members of the council, the Forest Lake Fire Department Relief Association is looking for a $200 annual benefit increase. To give some background to this, in 2019, the Relief Association presented to the Joint Fire Board requesting a mechanism for automatic benefit level increases if a certain criteria was met. And there was a discussion on that, and what was agreed upon is that if the Forest Lake Fire Department Relief Association remained above 150% funding level, that the association would bring a request to the Joint Fire Board looking for an annual increase. Being funded over 150% didn't mean that it was an automatic guarantee that we'd get an increase, but it would be brought up for discussion. It was brought up for discussion this year. We were at 193% funded in our account, and after discussion, there was a 5-0 vote to approve the annual increase. Once that was approved, then it requires us to bring it in front of council for a vote as well.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions for Chief on this matter?
Just to clarify a thing, Al, this is for the taxpayers, okay, that they know how this funding works. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, the Relief Association retirement account is separate from a city account. Funding is through the state of Minnesota, 2% money, which comes from fire insurance that's paid on commercial properties. So in asking for this increase, it doesn't impact an account that taxpayers would have to pay into. The reason why it is brought in front of the city council is if our account ever became deficit funded, the city would have to pay in to make that difference. And so any increase in the benefit level requires it being brought and approved by the city council.
This has been discussed at the Joint Fire Board many times also, but I just want to make sure that the taxpayers know how this funding works. Okay.
I think that's an important clarification to make, and also just a point of history in that this fund for many years had not had an increase. And so we have been working over the last 3 to 4 years to get into a more routine review cycle so that there is routine increases or at least routine consideration. And I'm happy to support this tonight, just kind of in line with trying to kind of increase overall fire comp. And this is one of the things we can do to just help with recruitment and retention, in my opinion. So, but I think it's also important to just note that the fund itself is standalone unless it were to, as Chief mentioned, be in the unfortunate position of being in a deficit position. But it has a history of being just very well funded, and the city has not had to pay as part of that liability. So.
I agree, Mayor Bennett. You know, there are very few benefits in a volunteer department, and it's important that we do what we can to attract and retain quality firefighters. And I think this is one of them, so I fully support it as well.
Very good.
Just one other question for Al, just to clarify for everybody else too, including the taxpayers. How many years do they have to be firefighters before they can be eligible for this pension fund?
The vesting period is 10 years, and once they hit 10 years, they're fully vested, but they only receive 60% of
Okay.
the funds. And every year past their 10 years, they pick up another 4%, and they're fully they're eligible for the full retirement at 20 years.
Okay, thank you. That's, just wanted to clarify that too. Thank you.
So is that a retention incentive?
It is. Typically, if an 18-year-old joins the department, retirement's a long ways off.
Yeah.
And so it's not as important to a person that's 18, but when you hit that 10 years, and every year after that point, it gets more and more and more important.
Mhm.
And so, as a retention tool of, getting longevity out of a firefighter, it plays a huge part, the older a firefighter gets.
Okay.
Any other questions or points of clarification? All right. If we're ready for a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the Fire Relief Association benefit increase.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
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 Oppose, and motion approved. Next this evening, we have Resolution 1017-2207, which is the Teets Farm Final Plat and Improvement Agreement. And Abby.
Thank you. In May of this year, the city approved a preliminary plat for Teets Farm. It's a 4-parcel development on about 140 acres of land. Since that time, the development team has been working to refine the plan. There were slight changes from the preliminary plat, just some boundaries getting shifted slightly to accommodate drain fields for septic systems. But aside from that, the preliminary plat is substantially similar to, or the final plat is substantially similar to the preliminary plat. Then when we are working on developments, we do execute agreements. This development does not have any public improvements associated with it. That's why we're entering into an improvement agreement. So for your consideration tonight, be 2 separate motions. One to approve the final plat for Teets Farm. There's 5 conditions that are embedded in the approval resolution that staff is recommending or considered for you or drafted for you. And then the second item for your consideration is approval of the improvement agreement associated with the Teets Farm development.
Thank you, Abby. And just for clarification for those who may be following the process, what happens next? Assuming council approves tonight, what happens?
Sure. After you approve tonight, we might have a few conditions that might still need to be met, like getting an easement signed, some of those sorts of things. Then what the developer will do is they'll actually have printed what are called Mylar sheets. So it's a special piece of paper. The city ends up signing some, the mayor ends up signing those, the developer ends up signing those. Then they end up having those recorded at the county. That process can be a little hiccupy, just depending on what other things we might have conditioned that approval on. But tonight is the final that you would ever see anything associated with this development.
Understood. Council, questions? Any points of conversation? All right. We have, as Abby mentioned, council, this is council's second time through this, and it has gone through planning commission as well, so we are close to being at the final point. And Abby, just for clarification, we are approving in two separate sections, two separate
Correct.
actions this
Yes. The resolution is specific to the preliminary plat. The improvement agreement has no resolution associated with it.
Mayor Bain, I move adoption of resolution number 10-17-22-07, a resolution approving the final plat of the Teets Farm with the 5 conditions as outlined by staff.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. As a follow-up to that, I would move that council approve the improvement agreement as outlined by staff for the Teets Farm.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And the agreement is approved. All right, moving on to our final agenda item this evening for our special meeting is 7E, which is Resolution 1017-2208, the Hidden Creek Preliminary Plat and PUD Extension Request. And Abby?
Thank you. In February of this year, the city approved a preliminary plat for Hidden Creek, a planned unit development that would contain 125 new single-family residential lots. The developer has submitted the final plat and plan with deadline dates of October 26th. Those are dates set by state law that we have to review applications by. Though we have been actively working with the developers to get this development in a place where they're ready to develop, there's a variety of factors that have caused the developer to want to put a pause in the development right now. Some of those are market forces. A lot of those are market forces. I'm just gonna say that. I think we've seen that with a number of our developments. Instead of letting that preliminary plat approval expire, what the developer has requested is an extension of the approvals that were granted in February. So just as a reminder to the council, you may not be aware of our subdivision regulations. When you approve a preliminary plat, it's valid for a year. And if they don't ask for an extension, then those approvals kind of go away and they'd have to start over. There's considerable amount of time and energy on both the public side and the private developer, and we wouldn't want those approvals to just, we wouldn't want the work to be all for naught. So what staff is recommending the council consider tonight is approval of a 1-year extension beyond the original plat expiration of February 14th, I believe it is, February 14th of 2023, to allow the development approvals for the preliminary plat by February 14th of 2024. If the developer has the assurance that the preliminary plat approvals are going to be valid, while they can kind of ride out some of these market forces, they'll be rescinding their final plat and plan application, and thereby not, we wouldn't meet any, we'd meet all of our deadlines, if that makes sense. So included in tonight is a resolution that does approve the Hidden Creek preliminary plat and PUD requests or extension request to February 14th, 2024.
Thank you, Abby. Council, any questions for Abby on this matter? Just point of clarification, so I'm clear. The developer is able to, at any, we're really just extending the timeline of anything from the city's perspective. The developer, within that time frame, is able to take whatever action
Correct.
they would like. And
Yep.
both parties to that development agreement are able to do so.
Yeah, so what essentially this would allow is them to submit a new application for the preliminary plan and plat at any point between now and February of 2024. They could turn right around in January of this year and maybe end up, you know, if the world is more favorable for them or the development climate is more favorable. But this just gives them a little bit of extra time for those approvals to stay in place.
Understood. Thank you. Council, any questions? Points of clarification? All right. So I would move that council adopt resolution 1017-2208, which is the Hidden Creek preliminary plat PUD extension request as outlined by staff.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And motion is, a resolution is approved. With that, we are at the end of our planned agenda this evening. We do have our regularly scheduled workshop here starting in just a few minutes. So we will adjourn, give everyone an opportunity to reset, and then we will reconvene in our workshop under a separate agenda here in just a few minutes. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and we're adjourned. We'll see you in just a few minutes.